Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Get CME for this episode by clicking on the CME link in the show notes. Today, we welcome Amruti Borad. She's a family physician, and today's Kevin MD article is titled Coaching Medical Students, a Game Changer for the Profession. Amruti, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So let's start by just briefly sharing your story and journey.
Yeah, I was born and raised Southern California. I come from a family where my parents are not physicians, but my siblings are in medicine. And I knew I wanted to be a physician very early on in high school. My parents tried to convince me otherwise, to explore your options, but I knew I really wanted to do that. So I ended up applying into an accelerated medical program, a few of them. And I ended up choosing Pitzer College in Claremont, California, and that linked to an osteopathic medical school at Western. And so, I applied to both the medical school and the college at the same time, and interviewed at the same time. And so really through college and then going into medical school, there were a lot of transitions, a lot of times where I just felt like I didn't belong, or that I wasn't good enough because I was on the younger side of things. And the way the program worked is you actually do your 3 years of college, you go to your first year of med school, and then come back and graduate from college.
Yes.
So a lot of, people in different places in their life than I was. And medical school was tough transition because I was a lot younger than the rest of the people that were there. And this was kind of most people's second career, and this was my first. So just trying to navigate that, and then also trying to navigate the match, because at the time, the osteopathic and allopathic match were different. And you basically had to take twice as many board exams just to apply to both matches.
Yeah.
But I ended up choosing family medicine. I went to UCLA for residency. I really love the variety of family medicine and being able to take care of families and build these relationships. And when I finished residency, I realized I really enjoy teaching. So I stayed on at UCLA and, taught at the school and in my clinic. And then, I got married and I moved to San Diego, and I joined a practice that was non-academic and really missed teaching. So I ended up doing some volunteer teaching. And then when the pandemic happened, I became our COVID lead physician. And that kind of started the whole process of burnout for me.
Sure.
I worked really hard for a year, almost every day. And I soon recognized that this was no longer going to work. And I kind of backed off some of the work that I could at the time. And then I felt this renewed sense of purpose when I became our clinic medical director. And shortly after, I became our department wellness director, and I became very involved in all of that work and was really happy. And then I started to notice the burnout again. So it was happening again because the patient volume was rising.
Yeah.
So I worked with a physician coach to kind of help me be an effective leader, but also to help me through the burnout. And, momentarily I had decided that maybe medicine is not right for me. Like maybe I should go. But in my heart, it just didn't feel right. And I was trying to figure out a solution. So I finally had the courage to admit it to my boss, and I went part-time.
Yeah.
And they allowed it part-time for a short period of time. And then I ended up resigning and was going to go to a place where they support part-time leadership work. But last minute, I had this opportunity to join their concierge practice for UC San Diego. And I realized that was the way for me to practice medicine, the time I get with patients, the support that I have.
Sure.
And, it led me to continue to do part-time work with concierge, but also certify as a coach myself and help both medical students and attending physicians. I really wanted to work at both ends of the spectrum. But over time, over the last few months, it's really evolved into focusing on medical students, just because I realized, speaking to many pre-meds, medical students, there really is no connection in terms of strong mentorship. And I realized that I'd like to be preventative. So, with all these physicians leaving the workforce, how do we keep people in medicine, and starting with the students, I think is the path. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about your article and
Mhm.
or you're coaching medical students a little bit. But one thing about your story caught my ear, and the fact that you had to mention the word courage when you had to talk to leadership about potentially going part time. Why did you feel that you needed to be brave? You needed courage to ask to cut down hours.
That's a good question. I think part of it was because I was a leader and I was embarrassed because, here I am, I'm supposed to be the one that's supporting my physicians and my colleagues. And and also being like a wellness director, I just felt that was so ironic that I would burn out. So it really stemmed from just being very embarrassed about feeling like I couldn't handle the positions I was in, and not knowing how that person was going to react. Like, how would leadership react to what I was saying?
How did they react when you asked for that?
So, I was very lucky. My boss, who's still my current boss, very understanding person. And actually, my medical director at the time, she had already mentioned to him, if I didn't know this, but she had mentioned to him a few weeks before I even talked to him that, Amruti doesn't look so good. Like, I think something's wrong. And so I think he already had it circulating in his mind. And when I asked to meet with him, he told me after the fact, of course, that, he was worried that something was wrong. So when I told him and I came with a solution. I think that's important is, I don't like to just complain. Like I complain, but then, and I don't even like to call it a complaint. Like, I'm
Sure.
telling you how I'm feeling and I have a solution for it. And that was some form of part-time work and some form of allow me to still be a leader, because that is what brings me purpose. If you take that away, it's going to be a lot harder for me to stay. So, I explained all that to him, and, he was very understanding, and he spoke with, I guess, our financial team, and they allowed me to go zero point 0.6 FTE, so 60%, which I wasn't expecting. Like, I just wanted 80% work, right? And they allowed me to stay in my positions, even though it was for a shorter period of time. I couldn't have asked for a better response, to be honest. And I think that's something to keep in mind is, no matter how someone's going to respond, like, if you just don't ask for something, if you don't say it, you'll never know what's going to happen.
All right. Let's talk about your Kevin MD article about coaching medical students, a game changer for the profession. Tell us how your article came together.
Yeah. So when I started, so my intention originally as a coach was to help attending physicians like myself, because that's the world I was living in.
Yeah.
But I kept getting out, I kept having pre-med students reach out to me, and I would just talk to them, about what they needed, what their questions were. Or, I went to an event where I spoke to some students just, at the dinner table, and realized that they really needed mentors.
Yeah.
Like, there's no consistent mentorship. And a lot of the schools were, yeah, they have, their wellness, some of their wellness activities, but it just wasn't enough. And so it really got me thinking about maybe students is actually the place to be, like, in terms of that's who I should be helping. And I don't currently precept students. I work in a private practice type setting, but I've done that before, and I know the value of that. But I think that I can provide more value coaching the students. So I started looking into, what coaches out there are coaching students, and I had friends who said, oh, try talk to this person or talk to that person, but every person I talked to was not coaching students.
Yeah.
It was coaching residents, which is also, of course, very important. But the students, I just felt like were left behind, like an afterthought. And so I decided, like, okay, I think students is the path. And I had already been coaching one-on-one, students, like through friends or whoever was reaching out to me. But I started thinking back to when I was a student and what problems did I have. And I think I hadn't thought about it in such a long time. And then I started to realize, like, oh my gosh, like, there were a lot of problems.
What are some examples of problems that these pre-medical and medical students reach out to you for?
So typically it's about, how am I going to make my application stand out? Especially because of COVID, a lot of them weren't able to shadow other physicians, which is a requirement for most applications. And I understand that. I don't know if schools kind of change their strategy when they realize that these students can't really shadow somebody for a whole month, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's something for, I think, schools to think about. But it was really like, how do I stand out? I've worked this hard. I took a year off to apply to school. I didn't get in. A lot of people not getting in the first time. Trying to figure out, how am I going to manage my time? How am I going to pay for this? Most students will go into debt for medical school, of course. And it's thinking about, okay, well, if I go into this much debt, what am I going to do after? Like, do I have to be a radiologist or whatever it may be, a high paying specialty? And then a lot of it, I realize, is just very mindset oriented. Am I good enough? Why did this person get in? I didn't. What school am I going to go to? Can I handle it? What's my family going to think? How am I going to balance my life? And when I was a student, I saw at least one person go through some stage of life that's not related to school itself, like marriage, divorce, kids, miscarriage, infertility, substance abuse, mental health disorders, like everything. And that's when I realized, like, being a student really, it really is like what the human experience is.
Sure.
You just don't think about it that way.
Do you feel like a lot of these students don't have the proper support at their schools or even at a local level and have to reach out to coaches like yourself?
Yeah, I do. Some of the students I've talked to, I mean, I made the assumption with some of them that, oh, well, your school must have some sort of like program.
Yeah,
And a lot of them were like, no, they don't. They don't have a program, or they just kind of have like a peer support program. And a lot of the students, they want to talk to somebody who's experienced, who's already been through everything they've been through,
sure.
not just their colleagues. So that's also another reason why I started thinking, well, how can schools incorporate coaching? And when I started to look into it, I was surprised that a lot of schools actually did have started coaching programs, but it's pretty new. And then I'll talk to other students who like don't even know what coaching is, and they say they have some sort of disorganized mentorship program, and they might see their mentor like once a year. And so there's a lot of room for improvement and for some schools to learn from other schools.
Tell us the difference between coaching and mentorship.
Yeah, great question. So mentorship really is, you're finding someone who's been through the same experience as you. So I'm a family doc, and say a student wants to be a family doc, and it's very development oriented. I'm kind of telling you my experience. I'm giving you advice, telling you, what you should do to further develop your career. Coaching is very different. It's like the opposite. You are not telling someone what to do. You are collaborating with someone, whether they have the same experience as you or not, and you're getting very clear on what your goals are for your future. And it's me asking you a lot of questions of like, well, what specialty do you want? And tell me why. And really just really drawing out from you, what is it that you want? Because students and really physicians are so used to people telling them what to do. And this is the opportunity to really drive professional development, really allow you to be, this adaptive learner, self-directed learner, and empower you to make your own choices.
So tell us a success story where a pre-medical or medical student reached out to you. And of course, you don't have to talk about identifying information, but just in general, tell us a story where you moved the needle for that student.
Yeah, so I did have the one of the students I was coaching that was about to start medical school. So a lot of anxiety about, and already had like baseline anxiety, depression. So a lot of it was focusing on mindset and getting them prepared for, what it's going to be like to be at school, but also, making sure that they make time for themselves before they start school. And also making sure, they had a lot of family members who were kind of like, oh, you're going to be gone, we're never going to see you again. And reframing, why your family might be saying those things to you, and reframing what the experience is going to be, that it's not just your experience, it is your family's experience. but also encouraging them to, they were an introvert, so encouraging them to reach out ahead of time, like
Sure.
join your Facebook group for your class, post something. And, it could be anything that's personal, you know, just reach out to one person when you go to orientation, like introduce yourself to one person. And I think, for her, she, coming out of her shell is a big thing. So joining that group, talking to somebody, making a few friends before school even started. And then she did spend, her whole summer uh, with her family, having a good time, not worrying about, I need to study and I need to do this, and I need to do that. So I felt like that really helped her get ready for the stage in her life that's going to be difficult. It's challenging to be a student, and like accepting that, yeah, it's not going to be easy, but I can handle it. I learned how to make time for myself, and I've learned how to communicate things with my family, and I'm learning how to put myself out there.
So we talk a lot about the burnout rate among physicians, but you're also in tune with students as well. What's the burnout situation like among pre-medical students today?
Yeah, so I think I like pre-meds and medical students, they have different, I think, different issues, but the pre-medical students I've spoken to, a lot of them are talking to me because they're trying to decide if they should even go into medicine.
Sure.
Right. Should I continue this course, or should I be looking into other paths in medicine? And so a lot of the coaching has been that is, well, let's talk about, what it's like to be a physician. And then let's talk about what are all the different options that you have in medicine. It's not just become a doctor and work in a clinic or a hospital, right? It's there's just so much out there that you might not know about, because when you're pre-med, you just have this one track mind of where you're going. I think with medical students themselves, it's really time management. They feel like they're drowning all the time. A lot of it is mindset, because they don't feel like they're good enough, they don't belong, they're comparing themselves to their peers, they're constantly being evaluated. And then they have role models, their attendings, who might be burnt out and have not addressed their own burnout. So it's like this negative feedback loop, essentially. And then a lot of them might come into school with mental health diagnoses, and burnout just perpetuates that, or burnout causes that, mental health disorders, including suicide risk, but also substance abuse can be an issue. So with students, it's really, medical students I've seen, it's really like this time management, like how do I get everything done? And then really, how do I maintain my relationships while I'm in this situation? And mindset is, how do I make sure that I'm learning everything I need to learn, that I'm keeping an open mind, that I'm staying in a frame where I can grow instead of, just become stagnant.
Physician, we're talking about the Kevin MD article, Coaching Medical Students, a Game Changer for the Profession. Amruti, tell us some of your take-home messages they want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
Yeah, so I think something that I've learned in the past year really is that whatever you do today can have big impacts later. So even if you don't see, what the work that you're doing today, whatever it may be, you're gonna see that it will impact you, or the lives of other people later on. So whatever you want to start, whether you want to start writing, you want to build a social media profile, you want to join, be a leader in, one or two organizations, join advocacy groups, whatever it may be, you really want to just take that one step, and you never know what's going to happen. I think that's really important for students, especially because you don't think about that when you're in school. um, and then, knowing that your voice matters, so you want to speak up, in whatever way that means, being professional but speaking up, and just knowing that, remembering, like, I am on my own path, because we get so siloed into one, comparing ourselves to everybody else, and if you do that, you're just never going to go anywhere. And really just, again, taking that next best step, whatever that means to you.
Amruti, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and insight. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.